Good morning and welcome to Zen Fits, broadcasting from Blackstone, Virginia, the center of the world, but then you too are at the center of your world, and I'll explain that later. The title of this talk is Create Your Sacred Space. Create your sacred space. So let's get into this. Let's dig into this. I don't know where we're going to go, but let's go anywhere. What does sacred mean? Well, let's say it's useless. A sacred space has no use. That's why it's sacred. You take a park, a wildlife reserve. It has no economic use. It has no resources. Can't use it. That's why people are always trying to get in there and make it useful. Dig it up, cut the wood, get the oil out of it or something. But if it's a sacred space, so it's sacred. The park has no use, but it's sacred. It's sacred because it's not economically developed. Has no economic use. So let's narrow this down then. Create your sacred space means create a useless space in your in the world. So we live in the world, and it's useful. You go to work, that's useful. In the household, you do useful things. You clean the house, you wash the dishes. You do useful things for the family, for the kids, for the wife, for the husband. We want to be useful. And we want to be useful in the world. One of the big problems with retirement is that you're no longer useful. In the sense that you were useful, you had a job. Even if you were digging ditches, it was useful. But when you retire, you're put out to pasture, so to speak. So you have to really find something to be useful, But the sacred space is useless. Even so, like in Buddhism, particularly Zen, if Buddha had a use, Buddha would be useless. Meditation. If meditation had a use, it would be useless. Why? Well, if you meditate to improve your personality, if you meditate to be, I'm a meditator, if you meditate to be above other people, if you meditate to improve yourself in any way, it's useful. But that's not meditation. Meditation is useless because it does nothing to enhance your personality. It has no use in improving yourself, your image, you see. If you try to improve your self-image through meditation, you develop a spiritual ego. And that's a hard one to get out of, believe me. So anyway, we're looking at the idea of the sacred as having no use in the world, but then it is most useful because it has no use. So how do you create a sacred space in your life? Well, we do this without really knowing it. If you have a little place under a tree where you like to go sit, be alone. Children do this. They go up in a tree. They all got a secret garden. All the stories about secret gardens, special places where you can get and the world cannot intrude. Lovers are sacred spaces. When lovers are together, they don't want the world to intrude. They want a grotto. They want a sacred space. They want a private place. They want to be alone. They don't want the world. They don't want to be watched. This is very common, but we don't really think in this way. Suppose you're at a party and you strike up a resonance with another person. Suddenly you meet somebody and there's a resonance. And you fall into a sacred space together. You're kind of like in a sacred space where each one is the other, and you get into a marvelous conversation. And then someone else comes in and sits in, it's destroyed. The third party destroys the sacred space because they objectify it. When you're in a special place, you're in a subjective space. But the world we live in is objective. And if someone comes in and they watch you, they're making your subjectivity objective. And you become self-conscious. And you become aware of being watched. You're objectified. You're made into a thing. But when you're in a sacred space, which is relationship, when you're in a sacred space, there is no thing. Not a thing is. Each is the other is you. It's a subjective space. So this sacred space is a subjective space that is free from the objective world where everything is an it. Go to Avatar. Can't help going to Avatar. Avatar demonstrates this, because in Avatar there are two viewpoints. One is the viewpoint of the sky people, or modern man, where everything is an it, everything is an object. And it's useful, or it's not useful. If it's not useful, cut it down. Everything has a use. But in the Pandora of Navi, everything is sacred. Everything is useful. There is no useful and not useful. Everything is one. Everything is sacred. And so the two worldviews there of the sky people objectifies the subjective world of the Navi. So Jake Sully, you see, is going between. He's a sky people, he's a Navi. He's back and forth, back and forth. Back and forth. 1 minute he's sky, 1 minute he's earth. 1 minute he's objective, 1 minute he's subjective. Objective, subjective, back and forth. Wah, wah, wah. Pew. He finally just blows up and jumps on the last shadow. He goes mad. He goes mad and jumps on death and wakes up. So it's a sacred space that can wake you up to your true nature, which is no thing. As long as you think you're a thing, you've objectified yourself. You see other things, and you see yourself as a thing through other people. Makes you self-conscious. Are you watching me? What are you looking at? You looking at me? You see? You're looking at me, making an object of me. You're making a judgment. You're fixing me. So the sacred space is unfixed. Everything is without boundaries, without impediments. So this is a metaphor of liberation, of awakening. So what we have to do, you see, in the world is to look at the world as a pond full of algae. A pond covered with algae. So you make a special space for, by clearing away the algae. And you see your true self in it. You see your reflection, and the reflection sees you. Just like you see the beloved. Just like you see the other, and the other sees you. There is no it there. Each affirms the other. Each says yes to the other. There is no gap. So the sacred space, you see yourself as the other. And there's just one. So in the sacred space, there's not two, there's one. I am in my sacred space. So I remember when I started with yoga back in 1970, I was delighted because there we were taught to create our sacred space. So you had a little meditation, just a little rug, a little corner, have a little altar, have some pictures of the gods, uh, or the guru, and you had a candle and some incense and had a little ritual. Maybe you chanted something, had a little cushion, had a little shawl, and created a sacred space. And you sat in there every day. You would go to that sacred space, took your shoes off, lit some incense, made it feel sacred, special. And the word you practice letting go of the worries of the world. They're out there. And you created a little algae-free space in the world, you see, a sacred space. And the problem with doing this, in the beginning, you do it in order to get something. You go to your sacred space, like if you're going to practice yoga, you want to be awakened or enlightened or improve yourself or get free of worry or whatever you want to do it for. You give a means to yourself. Well, I'm going to meditate in order to do something, get something, you see. But eventually you don't get it, so you either get tired and stop doing it, or you break through the barrier to the sacred. And when you break through the barrier to the sacred becomes useless. It's not going to give you anything. Meditation isn't going to do anything. It's not going to wake you up. It's not going to do anything. Except create a space for the sacred, for your true subjectivity that will spread into the world. So eventually your sacred space, if you can maintain it past the barrier of doing it for some self-motivation or self-improvement, you get through that barrier, your sacred space will begin to expand and the algae will retreat. And the algae will give in to the clarity. And your whole world will become sacred. Your whole world will become clear. And you'll no longer be self-conscious. You'll no longer be, are you looking at me? You no longer feel objectified. You'll be free from the objectivity of being in it. And Zen comes up with all these little pithy statements, like from the beginning, not a thing is. Well, what is that? From the beginning, not a thing is. Is that like all the way back to the Big Bang, there are no things? No. It's a vertical statement, not a horizontal. Horizontal is time. Not a thing is in the beginning, and all the future not a thing is. It's horizontal. No, this is the vertical from the beginning, which is right now, before I become aware of things, not a thing is. So who is this I that is not a thing? Who is this I that doesn't see the world as things? Who is this I that's not the sky people and Avatar? We're conditioned to be sky people. Everything's an it. We live in the third person. Everything is a noun. Everything is a person, place, or thing. Go to grammar school, remember that? Everything's an it. The first person I is forgotten, sleeping. Unless it can find a sacred space where the first person can awaken. In your sacred space, when you are maybe gardening, maybe cooking, whatever you do that is sacred to you, you do it because you're not getting paid. You do it because it's useless. I mean, you cook something, and what I mean is that you do it you don't do it for economic or personal gains. You do it because you love it, because in that sacred space of love, you are free from being in it, from being in the world of its, which is a self-conscious world, a world of fear. Are you looking at me? Why are you looking at me? Don't look at me. Ever try to, for me, my neurosis is that when I'm trying to do something, if somebody's watching me, my mind goes, wow, 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 and I freak out. It becomes, I'm caught. I'm very much aware of being caught in the split between somebody looking at me and me. So there's two me's. There's one looking at me, there's a me looking at me, and there's a me that's not looking. my mind is split, and this creates anxiety. This creates the wow, 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 wow. The feeling of being self-conscious, pinned against the wall, judged, objectified, you see. So the sacred space is your intention to create a space where you are not objectified, where you are free from the objectifying I, which is our own I. Is somebody's looking at you? That's you looking at you, but split out there. There is no external I. You're the only I. You're the only I, but we split it. We're conditioned to split it into two eyes. One's looking at me, somebody else, the world, them, they, the dictator, the tyranny, they, the conspiracy theory. They are doing it, you see. That's all a projection of my own I. My I is split into another I, and it's looking at me, fixating on me, objectifying me, and I feel the anxiety and I feel the terror of becoming fixed, of becoming a thing, of becoming defined. So you have to create your sacred space and work with that intentionally until clarity is stronger than the algae. And then without effort, clarity overcomes the algae. Without effort, the I overcomes the it. And without effort, you become your own first person. When Buddha awakened, he said, I alone am the honored one, the one. Now we look at that, oh, what a big ego that is. No, no, no. That is the sacred I, the I that has no it, the I that has no other. And that's the I that awakens in your sacred space. In your sacred space, I alone am the honored one. Thanks for dropping in.